Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you, I got an absolutely fantastic guest that's been on the show a couple of times. That's absolutely wonderful. He coming up from Canada, and we're gonna talk about how can we help our veterans who are still struggling. But I tell you what, before we even get off into that, I want to get the radio portion of this going. So, hey, Todd, let's do it.
It's Your Life is sponsored by James J.C. Cooley.
Life is a series of circles and cycles, phases and stages. These are your experiences that teach you the lessons of life. You can either ignore them or embrace them. Welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life. James is a motivational speaker, author, military veteran, and founder of the James Cooley Foundation. James is here to equip you to strive for greatness and to overcome adversity. It's time to get equipped today for the challenges of tomorrow. Now, here's the host of It's Your Life, James Cooley.
Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley, and I tell you, we got an absolutely fantastic show coming your way today. And we're going to be talking about how can we help our veterans who are still struggling. I mean, I spent 23 years in the military myself, and I tell you, I don't believe that once you go through and spend time in the battle zone, war zone, and all that, that you're not affected in some type of way. But others, many of us do not know how to handle that, and we are not willing to seek out for help, or we just don't stay with the program that long. I got an expert here, a good friend of mine, talk show host. I mean, he's doing so many great things that he's going to help us identify some of these things and some of the things that he's doing with his program and how he is helping a lot of vets. And he's coming all the way from Canada, Alberta, Canada today. And Mark Meincke has been on the show a couple of times. And I tell you, he's an absolutely fantastic guy. Let me tell you a little bit about him because I really want to get this show started. So Mark, first of all, is a great guy, great friend, and doing a lot of things. Mark Meincke is a Canadian Infantry Veteran and the creator of Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast for veterans, first responders, and their family. Operation Tango Romeo is on a mission to save lives and relieve pain by making help for the PTS injuries easy accessible. PTSD, PTS injuries. Those wounded with PTSD or PTS injuries are often disconnected from society and even from their own lives. So Mark is going to tell us a lot about that and a lot of other things that he is doing. And I tell you what, it's so happy to reconnect with Mark. I want to bring him on right away. How are you doing, Mark? How you doing, my friend?
Good to see you, James. Appreciate you having me back on.
Man, always, man. You are doing so many great things, and I tell you, we got a lot of great response when we did that Veterans Day pitch that you had done. And so I thought it was important that we don't always have to wait until Veterans Day to talk about issues and concerns that many of us are having because we are veterans and it affects our families, it affects our community, but most importantly, it affects us. So Mark, before we start, let me say this: if you want to be part of this conversation, you can pick up the phone. You can call into the radio station at 1-866-577-2473, or you can go to the comments and you can ask just great guests of mine any question you want to. You can ask me any question, or you can just become part of the conversation. So Mark, can you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about you that might have not um, was listening and watching the show last time you was on?
Well, just a little bit of backstory. So I served with the Canadian military from 91 to 95. And in the middle of that, I ended up doing a United Nations peacekeeping tour of Croatia. And that war was 92 to 95. And it was a genocide. It wasn't really covered by the news. Not too many people knew about it. Some people they hear things like Kosovo or Bosnia or Sarajevo, and they know something happened over there. But it all started in Croatia with the Croatian Civil War. So the United Nations were invited over. About 21 different nations all showed up, representing the UN flag, and Canada was one of them. They sort of used us as the poster boys for all of that because we're nice and have a good international reputation. But it was a tough, tough mission because there we are in the middle. We got Serbs on one side, Croats on the other, and trying to keep them from killing each other when they really wanted to be fighting. So because of that tour and numerous events that occurred while I was there, I was injured with PTSD. But back then, nobody knew what the heck that was. Took 23 years, James. 23 years before I was finally diagnosed with PTSD. And that's when the healing journey started. And as part of the healing journey, I ended up in a peer support group. And that peer support group grew. And about a year after, I ended up running the darn thing. And from there, from the peer support group and the lessons that we were learning and sharing and the stories that we were sharing, I decided to start the podcast, Operation Tango Romeo. And that's where that show grew and grew and grew because it turns out there's quite the need for peer support and for resources for PTSD. About 25% of my audience is in the States, which is unfortunate because the veteran population in the States is absolutely massive. It's at least 10 times what we have, probably more. So you would think that 90% of my audience would be in the States. So there's lots and lots of room for growth still. The people that come to the show are typically looking for help, for support. I get notes all the time of people that have been binge listened or binge watched for the first 10 or 20 or 30 episodes. And then they send me notes on what that has done for their life, that it's given them hope. I have people telling me that they binge listened to the first 40 episodes because once they started, they couldn't stop. And it just gave them hope and direction and let them know that they were not alone. There is hope and that healing happens. And that's continued to grow. In August of last year, of 2022, I took a bit of a extra direction. So not a new direction. I'm still doing what I'm doing, but advocacy dropped into my lap. And I've been working on veteran advocacy ever since, because as you have probably heard, it was in international news. A veteran was approached during a phone call that this veteran had with Veterans Affairs Canada. The suggestion was given to him that, hey, if up the road you're feeling a little blue and you're having suicidal thoughts, come to us first because we can give you medical assistance in suicide. It is diabolical that this happened, but it did. So he was looking for help and ended up getting offered assisted suicide, state sanctioned homicide, I call it. And when this blew in the news, which was a few weeks after I had learned about it, it broke on global news. And when that came out, the Veterans Affairs didn't deny it. They said, well, yeah, it happened, but it's an isolated incident. But of course, it wasn't an isolated incident. I started having veterans coming to me with their stories, telling me that it happened to them too. And over the months, we were able to piece together that it was different case managers. So, not just one case manager, it was numerous case managers from across the country, all doing the same thing, all making the same offer. If you're feeling a little down and you're having suicidal thoughts, instead of doing it yourself, call us and we'll do it for you. We will kill you. And I had probably the first 2 months, I didn't believe it because it was just too much to believe. But it is 100% true. And the investigations are now moving forward. And more veterans are still coming forward with this. And that's the work I've been doing, unfortunately, since August of 22.
You know, Mark, I'm a big fan of your show, man, and I'm one of those 25%ers that are always watching your show, and you have some tremendous guests. You know, so you say your audience is 25% of the United States, but you also you in other countries as well. Uh, can you tell our viewers a little bit about other countries you're in, and some of the services unto my that you offer, you know, with advice and experts that you have on your show that are out there to make sure that people like myself, you know, so got PTSD, or at least diagnosed with that, and others can seek out to.
Sure. So one of my favorite metrics to keep track of is how many countries that have tuned in at some point, and it's over 70 countries now, which is just neat. The top ones, though, Canada is number one, States is number two, the United Kingdom is number three, and Denmark is in fourth place. Then after that, Australia, New Zealand are trailing behind it. So the bulk of it is in North America, and the bulk of the resources that I shed light on are North American resources. So it's not all Canadian stuff. But when it comes to modalities of healing, that's universal. So it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you are in the United Kingdom or China. It just doesn't matter because the modalities are still available to everybody. There's a lot of very advanced therapists doing things that are just not being done through Veterans Affairs of any country. And when you hear about these modalities, it's easier for you to know where to start shopping. One of the challenges that people have is that they don't know where to start. So I have been noticing that gap since I started my healing journey back in 2017, that there are so many resources, but there's no one-stop shop. So I'm doing my best with the show for shedding light on all these different resources, whether they be retreats, equine therapy, psychedelics, whatever it happens to be. And the majority of those are in North America. But again, if it's just the modality that you're learning about, let's say you want to learn about psychedelics. So I have had numerous experts on talking about psychedelics. Plus, I've talked about my own experience with them, what I found works, what I've tried, what I haven't tried. And with that, you at least know where to start. Because if the first door that you knock on isn't successful, the first door that you knock on doesn't work, or you don't find any help, a lot of people stop right there, James. They stop, they pop out of the system, and that's it for them. And that's really unfortunate. So I'm trying to give people the best foot in the door that they can to have the best experience that they can when they reach out for help that first time.
Let's hold that thought because we got to take a station break. But if you want to be part of the conversation, call in at 1-866-577-2473, or you can go to the comments and ask this great guest any question you want to. Remember, it's your life. We'll be back shortly after the break. I'm James Cooley. I am the founder and CEO of the J.C. Cooley Foundation, Options, Opportunities, Lasting Choice Program. Our primary mission is to help build a foundation of our youth and young adults and communities. And we encourage everyone to dream big, think big, and be big at everything you do. And the way that you do that is, first of all, you got to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You have to know that you are here for a purpose. You also have to be able to step out your comfort zone and do things that you probably didn't think that you can do. Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I got my absolutely fantastic guest here. We're talking about how we can help our veterans who are still recovering. And just like I mentioned in the opening, that if you have been in the military, if you have served in war zones, or just a lot of different things that happen in the military that many of us struggle with dealing with once we get out the military, and it affects our family, it affects our communities. Most importantly, it affects us. And Mark could just identify some of the things that his organization is doing. And if you want to be part of this, all you do is go to the comments, or you can just call into the radio station 1-866-577-2473. Mark, I want to pick it up with that one because you also stated openly talking about your injuries and what was it like, how it affected life, and how do other people deal with these certain type of things. Can we talk about that? How difficult is it for veterans to deal with this?
Yeah, we sure can. So, one of the first things I want to say is that trauma is trauma is trauma. It doesn't matter if you have a combat tour, if you have no tour, it can happen to anybody. We're all vulnerable for it. And it is an injury. It's an injury that is tough to prevent. But nobody is immune from. You can be more resilient. This is something that you can build so that you're less susceptible to a trauma injury, but nobody is immune from it. Could you imagine, James, if somebody comes back from a war zone, their legs were ripped off by a landmine blast? And could you imagine if people were making fun of that person and saying, "You must have weak shins"? I wouldn't have ever had my legs ripped off from that landmine. I wouldn't even have even hit the landmine because I would have seen it. How did you not see that coming? Of course, nobody would ever do that. You couldn't imagine somebody doing that to somebody who lost their legs through a landmine strike. And yet, still, with our police, first responders, military, it's still happening. People still say, well, you know what you signed up for? It's a tough job. You got to learn to have thick skin, and all these silly tropes that people are using that are not very helpful and do nothing but help to create more stigma so that people don't uh, even reach out for help because they're too worried that it could be a career ender, or maybe they're just embarrassed. But the truth is, it can happen to anybody. Nobody's immune. And if somebody is trying to tell you to suck it up, buttercup, chances are that that person themselves are struggling and just don't have the courage to face it. So step one is knowing that you're not alone. It's not a sign of weakness. It can happen and does happen to anybody, no matter how mentally strong you think you might be. So from that standpoint, start somewhere for help. And that's a big part of where the show comes in, because if you don't know what that first step should be, you got a show list. I'm almost at 280 episodes now. Go through, listen to different experts, to different stories, and decide on what your first steps are going to be. And if those first steps don't work out, try again. If you are in hell, the best thing you can do is to keep your feet moving. If you're in hell, the best thing you can do is to keep your feet moving. Don't don't stay there. You don't have to stay there. And also, unfortunately, nobody can do it for you. Nobody can force you to participate in therapy. Nobody can force you to get out of the house and get into nature. Nobody can force you to start moving your body or to eat better, to change your diet, to hydrate. Nobody can force you to do these things. Only you can take those first steps. And where my show comes in is to, as best as I can, help you take those first steps in the right direction so that there are only a few steps to get to where you need to be and not miles and miles.
So Mark, can you tell us why some veterans it's so hard for them to even share their story with other veterans?
Shame.
And
Shame, James. Shame because of the stigma. Shame because you think you're the only one. Shame because you think that other people deserve to be injured, but you don't because they went through something that's worse than you. Uh, and that shame of I should have been stronger. I should have done this. I should have done that. Or I don't have the right to be injured because other people have been through worse. That shame, that misplaced, silly emotion of shame is what keeps people from asking for help. And that's why our suicide rate within the veteran first responder community is absolutely ridiculous. People talk about the 22 push-ups a day for the 22 suicides a day. Well, that's a number we're all familiar with, but it's not the truth. The real numbers are a minimum of double that every single day in the United States alone. And any of us that have served, we know several that have taken their life, and maybe not quickly through with a firearm or a knife, but many that have through addiction, through alcoholism, through drugs, through homelessness. We all know a few that have died either quick or fast because they did not either ask for help or they didn't keep asking for help if it didn't work the first time.
wow, so the title of the show is How Can We Help Our Veterans Who Are Still Struggling? Do you believe that people are in the world who may not understand, which a lot they don't understand veterans, they don't understand the trauma, they don't understand the pain or suffering that we sometimes go through. Why do you think that?
Well, if you don't talk about it, it's kind of tough for people to understand. And it's an experiential thing. I've been skydiving. Try to explain the sensation of jumping out of a plane. You can't, any more than you can explain the thrill or the terror of being in a firefight or having landmines going off all around you or the smell of a charred human body. These are things that you cannot describe to another human being. These are things that only you can experience firsthand. So the best that we can do is to try to understand and to try to have empathy for each other. The experiences that first responders have, that soldiers have in a war zone, these are not experiences that can be imagined, that can be described. Even the best author with the most skillful prose can't capture with the most amazing poem what it's actually like. They can only scratch at the surface of it. So knowing that we don't know and giving those experiences that reverence is a real good starting point, James.
Wow. So we talk about PTSD, and a lot of people don't know what it is. Can you tell our viewers and our listeners what is PTSD?
I scratched on it in the beginning of our conversation, but it's a really, really good question to drill down on. So it is a neurological injury. Imagine your car and you're heading out from your driveway, and all of a sudden, the gas gets stuck on full. It's in drive, and there's not a darn thing you can do about it. All you can do is hope for the best and zigzag around the floor, round through the residential. Hope you don't go into a school zone. Make for the highway. Try to find a straight, safe place, maybe you're going to choose to crash that car into a tree. But either way, that throttle is stuck on full, and you can't do anything about it. All you can do is manage it and steer that car as best as you can. That is a lot like what the neurological injury of PTSD is. What happens is that an extreme example, like an extreme event happens. whether it be, and it doesn't have to be a combat zone. It could be a sexual assault, a car accident. For combat veterans, it's often a firefight or a landmine strike or any near-death experience, or experience where you witness something that was absolutely horrific. Your amygdala, the thing that controls the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response in your brain, gets stuck on full. That gas gets stuck all the way down to the floor. Which makes it the motor, which is your mind and your body, revving at top rev in first gear, ready for the engine to blow. And there's not a thing you can do about it. So you try to go to sleep that night and you can't. You end up with nightmares because the foot is still down on the gas. So you're still running for your life. You're still in combat, even in your dreams, and there's no escaping it. Because you're at this heightened state all the time, you have hypervigilance. So you're just walking down the mall with your family, but everybody else sees is the shops and the windows and the advertisements. That's not what you see. What you see are threats. And what everybody else is doing, which is enjoying yourself, you're in fight or flight mode. And you're doing threat assessment. Who is a threat? What is a threat? And how would I deal with that threat? What are my weapons of opportunity? Would I use this to bash a bad guy across the head? If that's the bad guy, what are our routes of escape? What's the entrance and egress? And it never, ever turns off, James. It's absolutely exhausting. And also because you're in this heightened state, what do you know? You're a little bit irritable. You're irritable with your family, with your children. The patience just isn't there, especially in situations where there's a lot of people around. And living in that heightened state constantly, day in, day out for years, watching your family fall apart as a result of your behavior, losing one marriage and then another marriage and then another marriage. These are all the things that contribute to the high suicide rate. And understanding how brutal this is, and then it spirals into depression, anxiety, food disorders, addiction, and it is completely and totally destructive to a person's life if you don't know the therapies and the help and the healing to deal with it. It is absolutely devastating, James.
Man, I have never heard anybody put it together like what you just did. Because you can visualize that these things happen. You notice, you watch people, you know people, that everything that you just described is actually what's going on in their mind. And I believe that if we don't reach out for help because of shame or because of embarrassment or whatever that might be, I think we tend to wonder deeper and deeper inside of that mindset that we have. Uh, we got about a minute before the break. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, having resources that work available. Unfortunately, talk therapy only has an efficacy rate of between 12 and 16%. Now, if somebody has numbers that are different than that with some good data, I'd sure like to see it. But everything that I've seen in all the work I've done, between 12 and 16%. So how about a better mousetrap? How about a better mousetrap so that when people do reach out for help, the help is there and it works?
So we got to take a station break, but we're going to come back shortly. We're going to pick it up with Meincke, and we're going to continue to talk about some of the misconceptions of PTSD. If you want to be part of the conversation, that's 1-866-577-2473. We'll see you shortly after the break. Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show, East Your Life. And wow, that last segment that we just had was so inspiring. And it was so, how would you put it? You can feel it. You can, Mark, you gave our viewers and our listeners an understanding of the true things that sometimes we as PTSD have been diagnosed for that and all this those type of things. Some of the things just affect people differently. It affect people differently, but somewhere along the line, I think you almost identified everything that we go through. But Mark, what are some of the misconceptions about PTSD?
It's a great question. And to avoid the stigma, to avoid those misconceptions, something called recover out loud is one of the mantras of the show. Every time you recover out loud and you publicly say, yeah, I'm off to therapy. Oh, why? Well, PTSD, because of this, because of that. The more you normalize it and talk about it, not in a whisper, but you talk about it matter of fact, like I'm going to get groceries or I'm going to go fill up the car with gas. The more you do that, the more it gives courage to others to reach out for help. It's like, oh, well, if you're not ashamed of it, then I won't be ashamed of it. It's called lending courage. So starting there is a great place to start. Every time that you're lending courage, and every time you do that, to answer your question, it helps to alleviate these misconceptions because it's not a secret. It's not that dirty little secret. And it's the secrets that have power over us. It's the secrets that are cancerous and they're putrid and they rot. Things don't rot in the sunshine, they only rot in the dark rooms. So get out of the dark rooms, get into the sunshine. And no rot happens there, no stink and decay happens there. When you're out in the sunshine saying, yeah, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what it's like, and this is what I'm doing about it. That's how you get rid of the misconceptions so that people realize, oh, you're a combat veteran with PTSD. You're not a homicidal maniac, which some people believe. They believe that if you have PTSD, you're just a very dangerous person. And it's exactly the opposite. The truth is that combat veterans dealing with PTSD tend to be recluses. And because of the hypervigilance, they see threats that you are completely oblivious to. So, and they're the ones that are likely to step in and to help you. So having combat veterans in your neighborhood who are affected with PTSD makes that a very, very safe neighborhood. And you'd be very well served to be in that neighborhood and to support those veterans. There have been retreats and houses of relief where the neighbors, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, put together petitions to shut down these houses, these retreats, because they're scared that the veterans might attack them in their sleep. And it's just so the opposite of the truth. It's an anti-truth. It is the opposite of what is real. So recovering out loud so that the next time one of these neighbors hears about a house that's going up, that's a retreat, they go, oh, well, thank God. That's good. You mean next door, I'm going to have a house that is constantly frequented by combat veterans and police and EMS? Well, how good is that? I got the safest house on the block, because that's actually the truth. So recovering out loud to get rid of these misconceptions. And also, we already touched on it. It's not a weakness. It's an injury that anybody can be injured with.
Wow. Hey, Mark, is it possible to be cured from PTSD? If so, how?
The common thought on that is no. It can only be managed. Your trauma cup can get bigger so that you can deal with it easier. But part of my mission is to find that better mousetrap, James. And I have found several good mousetraps. Some of them definitely heal to a portion, and some heal completely. I've recently got certified as a coach with 22-0. It's a organization out of the United States from an American infantry veteran. His name is Dan Jarvis, that him with Dr. Pamela Arnell have put together a form of neurolinguistic programming that works. It's worked on me. It's worked on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of combat veterans with severe PTSD, as well as first responders. I just treated somebody or coached somebody through it this morning. I coached somebody through it yesterday. In yesterday's example, something that this fellow that was quite extreme, that this fellow's been dealing with for the last 30 or 40 years, and with no luck through regular therapy. One coaching session in about 20 minutes, and it was fixed. This morning, he messaged me that he was slept for the first time in a long time, and he slept like a baby. He didn't even want to get out of bed this morning because he was so relieved. So it works. And it works really, really well. And if anybody wants to access this, there's a whole network of coaches, and it's free. We don't charge, through 22-0. So the number 22, the word zero, Google it, and you'll get it linked up with a coach in your area. Get paired up with a coach, and they'll run you through the protocols. There's only, unfortunately, 3 coaches in all of Canada, and I'm one of them. But we're doing as much as we can.
Wow. You see, Stacy Bullock says, thanks so much for this needed information, because, it's a lot of misinformation out there. And we just need to tell it like it is. And that's what she's saying.
Thank you, Stacy.
So Mark, we have talked about PTSD affecting the families and veterans. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I call it the blast radius. So in the Army, not so much in the Navy where you were, but in the Army, if you throw a grenade, you know that the danger zone is about 5 meters around that grenade.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a mortar round, if it's a small mortar round, it's about 20 meters. The bigger mortar round is more like 50 meters. If it's an artillery round, it's a good 100 meters around the impact, that it's super, super dangerous. That's the blast radius. And when you are cranky, distempered, that affects those around you, just like a blast radius. And it doesn't have to be a great big, angry, yelling, punching a hole in the wall episode. It doesn't have to be, which I used to have a lot, especially right after I was in a war. Punched holes in drywall, punched out the windshield of my car once from the inside out. That was a neat trick. It doesn't have to be something quite so overt. It can simply be a hard look on your face. My wife is more than once looked at me and goes, "You're looking at me like you hate me." It's just my face. What it is me going into regulation mode, because I think I heard something that was that I thought was offensive in that moment, and I needed to regulate. So I'm giving her the stare of death without a word, and just that stare of death can be more than enough to blow a relationship apart. So it doesn't have to be some big thing, but either way, these different or avoidance. If your spouse wants to go to a sporting event and you're like, hell no, because there's too many people and there's too much energy. So you're a hard no and they're a hard yes, and they don't want to go without you. Well, that's creating disconnection in your relationship. So that's another way that it affects. And just overall anxiety with your children. It affects how you communicate with them, what you say to them, what you don't say to them, the things that you participate with them, the things that you don't participate with. It affects every aspect of your relationships with others and your ability to hold a job. Because these same issues with your coworkers or your boss aren't good. Because if you're programmed with, if you have a problem, kill it, and your boss is the problem, you can't back off when they tell you to do something that you don't disagree with. So you'll be that one person in the organization that stands up to the boss and says no, and maybe even an FU thrown in there. and that's pretty tough to keep a job if you're that person. So what we see in the trauma-rich communities that are affected by this is they go into civilian life. They can't keep a job for the life of them. So they find other ways to survive. A lot of times it's entrepreneurism. A lot of times people are crawling into a truck, or they're being a truck driver just so that they can be out on their own and not have to deal with people. You see all kinds, or they go into something that's as close as possible to being familiar, which is police and EMS. They go into that because it's paramilitary. It's something that where they are more comfortable. They feel less like a fish out of water. But these are all the ways that it affects your life and the blast radius of your circle, all the people that are around you.
Wow. So Mark, what are some of the most the common services that the VA affairs provide?
Well, I'm not as familiar in the States, but it's from what I've seen and what I've heard from dozens and dozens of U.S. veterans is that it's pretty close to what we got. So you make your initial claim through the VA, or up in Canada, it's VAC, Veterans Affairs Canada, and you start the process. You get assessed. You go through the most horrible assessment process where they grind you with like 500 input questions that is traumatizing by itself just to go through. And then you get your diagnosis, and then you go on the waiting list. I was on the waiting list for 10 months after my intake before I actually got to see a therapist. So hopefully it's less than that. Then you start talk therapy, which again has efficacy rate between 12 and 15, 16%. And that's it. And you hope for the best. So the system isn't the best, but it's starting to open up, and there are more and more usually volunteer organizations that are run with funding. Some of the ones in the States, Heroic Hearts Foundation with Jesse Gould. He does ayahuasca retreats and psilocybin retreats. There are several others out there. And again, 220, which does the PTSD coaching, which releases the emotional charge from the memory so that you can think about the same memory without getting upset at all. And then the symptoms go away as a result. There are several different organizations that are privately or publicly funded that have nothing to do with Veterans Affairs. And those are often the best places to go. Now, not to dissuade you from regular talk therapy. That is still something that you should do. Just know that if you run into a pill pusher that are trying to push antipsychotics on you, there is a time and a place for those. But
I want you to hold that thought. We're
Sure.
going to pick that up right after the break, but that's very important information to talk about. So we're going to take a station break.
always
we're
like the
gonna come
tunes, James.
We're going to come back and finish listening to this great man who always have a standing invitation to my show. So if you want to be part of the conversation, 1-866-577-2473. We'll be back shortly after the break. It's your life.
Really get a chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, or hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? And everything that you do.
will fight again. And if you want my opinion, I'll let it take me away. Only relief is the four on the floor and the crowd that goes, turn it up, 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 turn it up.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and this is such a fascinating interview that I'm having with Mark Meincke, and so knowledgeable in a lot of the things that relate to a lot of things that veterans and first responders, I mean, go through because of the line of work that they was in. And it's important to talk about these things because if we just keep everything locked up inside our own head, and if we don't go out and talk about these things, the public won't be aware of it, and they don't know how to handle these things. Just like what Mark was saying, a lot of times they think just because you got a veteran that might have PTSD or somebody around you, they're going to jump you or do something crazy. Most of the time, that's not the case. But we need to be aware of those things. So, Mark, I really appreciate you sharing all of this stuff. Now, we got more. We're not done. We got a lot more that we're going to talk about. We were talking about some of the things that the Veteran Affairs provide, and I want to pick it back up with that.
Sure. So I didn't want to dissuade talk therapy because keep your feet moving. You know, it's a good place to start. And if you are blessed enough to get a really good therapist who's going to use a modality like EMDR, something like that, that's great stuff. And if you have a choice, EMDR is one of the better modalities within the talk therapy world. So if you can pick and choose somebody who does EMDR, which is the rapid eye movement modality. Um, Again, there is a time and a place for the psychiatrists, for the prescriptions, for dopamine or whatever they're, and the antipsychotics and the SSRIs. There's a time and a place for that. If somebody is really acute and they just need some short-term relief, that's the time and a place for it. But you don't want to be on this stuff for the rest of your life. There's been more and more research that has shown quite clearly, and there's quite a few medical doctors saying this, that the typical antipsychotics actually don't work. They aren't providing you anything beyond the placebo effect, maybe 1 or 2% better than the placebo effect at best, and only in the short term. So it is not a place that you want to get stuck. There are other modalities or other steps that a person can take to take control and to have an immediate relief. One of those things is ketosis. So we've all heard of the keto diet. The keto diet is a great place to start, just for a month, just so you can feel the difference. And typically takes 3 or 4 days before you slip into ketosis. Once you are in ketosis, the biggest thing that you're going to notice is how much of a lift that you've gotten, how your brain clears up and depression lifts. So getting into ketosis is a great immediate action drill. Another one is fasting, because fasting puts you into ketosis. Do a 24-hour or 48-hour fast with just water. You'll feel the mood lift. Other ones, of course, I can't really recommend on the air, although they work, like psilocybin. If you have a legal way, because you're in Colorado or some other jurisdiction where you can get a hold of psilocybin legally, because you don't want to get yourself into trouble, psilocybin in a microdose even. So there was a lot of debate whether or not microdosing has any effect, but it does. So there's been some really good science that's come out. you can microdose, which means you're having a little bit of psilocybin mushrooms without the psychoactive effect. So you're not seeing pink unicorns dancing through your living room. And without the psychoactive effect, you can still feel a significant mood lift, and immediately, like within the first few hours with psilocybin. So I'm a big fan of microdosing, and it's been shown through Veterans Affairs, and it's coming out more and more officially, that a big macrodose under supervision with a trip sitter sitting with you can alleviate depression symptoms and whatnot for up to a few months just with one sitting. And for some people, it's actually been permanent results. So I'm a big fan of psilocybin. On a more conventional note, ketamine clinics have been opening up across Canada. I don't know what the availability is in the States, but it is doctor supervised psychedelic treatment with ketamine, but doctor supervised. So that's a great place to go as well to start getting some really good, quick acting, knock the head off the dragon kind of results.
Wow. And Mark, you've been working on a lot of things, and we probably got about 3 minutes left in the show. But you would tell me something that was interesting about you being a star expert witness, and can you talk a little bit about that?
So because of my show, a lot of people come to me with a lot of different stories, and I can't give them all attention, unfortunately. I've become a little bit famous, and because of that, I am overwhelmed every day with messages. So I do my best to get through them. But one of these messages that did get through that I gave attention to was to a veteran who had recordings of the apology phone calls from Veterans Affairs Canada. They were apologizing for offering him euthanasia, assisted suicide, instead of therapy. So this caused quite the stir and started to get in the news. And the Conservative Party of Canada invited me to Ottawa, to the nation's capital, to testify in front of the Standing Committee in Veterans Affairs. So in front of all kinds of parliamentarians, I sat down with them and told them what I knew about the phone calls that had been happening. And it just grew from there. People saw my testimony. One of the veterans that saw my testimony came to me privately. I was able to luckily convince this person to do an expose on my show, just a quick 10-minute whistleblowing episode. He went under the pseudonym of Bruce. And Bruce talked about it happened to me too. And then others started coming forward, including Christine Gauthier, who is a para athlete and a Canadian veteran. So this has happened to numerous veterans from numerous different caseworkers, and the investigation is still ongoing, which of course they're trying to bury under the carpet as much as they can. But it's all coming to light now.
Wow, man, this has been an absolutely amazing show. Mark, I want you to know that you got a standing invitation to my show, because this is so knowledgeable how you explain these things. So I want to thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Michelle Cooley, who put together another great show. I also like to thank my producer, Todd, always doing great shows. I'd like to thank, most importantly, you, my viewers, my listeners, for taking time to watch the James Cooley Show. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. It's your life. Dream big, think big, and be big at everything you do.